Judges have blocked two of President Trump's most controversial executive actions. Tonight's deadline for federal workers to accept a so-called buyout offer is now on hold, and a hearing is set for Monday. A source tells CBS News at least 40,000 workers have already accepted the deferred resignation, which looks to shrink the federal workforce. And a federal judge in Seattle blocked President Trump's order to end birthright citizenship. It's the second judge in 2 days to rule that order is unconstitutional. Some Democrats are worried the nation's top weather agency is the next target for Elon Musk's efficiency department. Former National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration officials tell CBS News that NOAA is expecting its staffing to be cut in half. Today, President Trump is calling for a task force to investigate what he called the targeting of Christians. While attending the annual National Prayer Breakfast in Washington this morning, he said Americans need more religion.
We have to bring religion back. We have to bring it back much stronger. It's one of the biggest problems that we've had over the last fairly long period of time.
CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins us now. Ed, if you want to weigh in on that comment, feel free. But these two court decisions in the last hour are putting the brakes on some of President Trump's moves to reshape the federal workforce and immigration policy. What can you tell us?
That's right, Lindsay. We're getting a living, breathing example of checks and balances at work. Let's start with the Boston Federal District Court decision that pushes the deadline for these deferred resignation offers, or buyouts, payouts, whatever you prefer to call them, until at least Monday afternoon. The judge in Boston asking that it be held up until then. Those that were suing include a series of federal worker labor unions, called on the Office of Personnel Management based here in Washington, the HR office basically for the federal government, to send out a new email informing the nation's roughly 2 million civilian federal employees that this deadline is being put off until at least Monday afternoon. OPM is expected to send that in a little bit. Then there's the birthright citizenship case. A federal district judge in Seattle, a Reagan appointee, a guy named John Kuhnauer, writing a little while ago in his decision, quote, "The president has implied the rule of law has become something to navigate around and ignore. In this courtroom and under my law, the rule of law is a bright beacon that I intend to follow. I refuse to let that beacon go dark today. Birthright citizenship is a fundamental constitutional right. The 14th Amendment guarantees the rights of citizenship. We're all citizens subject to the right of law. A constitutional amendment under the guise of an executive order is equally unconstitutional," the judge writes. If they want to change birthright citizenship, they will need to change the U.S. Constitution. It is clearly unconstitutional. The preliminary injunction is granted on a nationwide basis. So that is also on hold. As you mentioned, a Maryland district court judge had also blocked the birthright citizenship move just yesterday. But again, all of these orders that the president has issued, most of them at this point, are being challenged in one way or another in court. And it's a reminder that he moved quickly to get these things on the books, knowing that legal challenges would likely come, in essence, inviting them. And so we will await formal reaction from the Trump administration or from the president himself to these decisions. Not entirely surprising, but a good reminder to those perhaps who are somewhat shocked by what's been going on the last several weeks, that this is the way the federal system works. The president can try to do something, people can sue to slow it or stop it, and those processes are underway, at least in those two cases.
Quite a blistering quote you read. Back to the federal worker deadline. Do we know what happens to the 40,000 people who have already accepted the so-called buyout?
We don't, and remember, it's at least 40,000. In fact, in the case in Boston, Justice Department lawyers said tens of thousands of employees had accepted the offer to essentially be paid to stay home through the end of the fiscal year and then move on. And they're welcome to, under this current arrangement, seek other employment in the meantime. So we'll see. We're waiting the text of whatever email it is that will go out to these federal employees telling them that the deadline is off. Remember, those unions had been advising federal employees not to take the offer because there was no legal guarantee yet, no budgetary authority for it, despite the assurances that had been sent in multiple emails in some cases to employees at various agencies encouraging them to take it.
The White House is trying to clarify the president's plan to take over Gaza. What are they saying?
Well, none other than the president's trying to clarify it. In fact, in a Truth Social post overnight, Lindsay, he wrote in part the Gaza Strip would be turned over to the United States by Israel at the conclusion of fighting. He says later the U.S., working with great development teams from all over the world, would slowly and carefully begin the construction of what would become one of the greatest and most spectacular developments of its kind on Earth. No soldiers by the U.S. would be needed. Stability for the region would reign. Important to point out, yesterday, the press secretary and other officials suggested that instead of a permanent resettlement of those in Gaza, as the president initially suggested, instead it would be the temporary relocation of people while the Gaza Strip was rebuilt. But who would pay for it? How would that be done? When could they return? Who's paying for all this? And if not U.S. troops, whose troops potentially to secure the area? Also, to what extent would Israel be involved? All of that unclear. It's all part of a Trump administration push to try to resolve the war between Israel and Hamas and the situation in the Gaza Strip. As several administration officials said yesterday, the president's trying to push some outside the box thinking, and he's certainly done so. Lindsay?
Ed O'Keefe, thank you.